Explore your dreams, people. Explore your dreams. That is at least what Yvette Jurgen wants us to do. Go to outer space. Go to outer space. So that is essentially the contention of the piece. Well, not exactly. Look, the contention of this piece, and by the way, we are talking of the 2014 exam. The contention of this piece is not merely just, hey, we need to go out of space, but that the governments, rather, she actually doesn't specify which government or if it's a singular government, but she says governments need to invest more in space. That's what she wants. Now, the response. By the way, yeah, we see the contention very simply here. We've got to invest in the next generation of technology. That is, we've got to invest in space exploration. And then the response of the planet, we get Dr. Peter Lakis, who I think it's fair to say does not like Yvette Jurgen. What a ridiculous name, might I add. Does not like Yvette Jurgen's call for outer space. Why? Because he thinks it's fanciful. He thinks it's ridiculous. Wake up, Yvette. So those are the general gist of both of the pieces. And let's see how they translate into written contentions. So firstly, the topic of concern. What is it? Well, the topic of concern is whether governments should invest in space exploration. That's the point at issue. Should the governments or should they not invest in space exploration? Should we be supporting it or not? In her opinion piece, always note the type of media or format of the text. What the title is, Exploring Our Dreams, Yvette Jurgen contends governments should invest in space exploration. Okay, very simple. And in response to Jurgen's piece of the planet, Dr. Peter Lakis contends governments should not invest in space. Target audience is the general public. Okay, so just noting something there, you'll note how simple each of the contentions are. One just says they should, and one says they should not. And that's pretty classic. And if you're doing that, you know you're on the right path, because what is not a contention? A contention is not a list of reasons. A contention is just a single statement, the core argument. So it might feel a little brief when you write it. You may feel the urge to write more. I know a lot of students do. They feel the urge to start giving reasons why the contention is true, reasons why Jurgen believes the government should invest in space exploration. But all that is what you do in your analysis. You can analyze those reasons and those appeals in your actual analysis. All right, so what goes on in this piece? Jurgen's piece, specifically. Well, as always, I generally start with, I don't know why, but I just do. I've fallen into the habit. I start at the beginning of the piece. I'm always curious with writers why they decide to start their piece in the way they have done. I mean, if you think about it, Yvette Jurgen has a million different options she could have started her piece. But she starts it by, well, what? By suggesting space isn't far away. Interesting. Why did she do that? Why? What's the persuasive value of saying space, people, is not that far away? It's basically as close to Canberra, which isn't that far from Victoria. Okay, so why did she do that? Well, Jurgen begins her piece by attempting to shorten the perceived distance from space to Earth. Quotation. She does this to undermine the potential belief in her audience that space is too far away to feasibly bother with. Okay, so it's very clever what she does. She's actually, what she's done here, maybe without many people realizing, is that she has diffused a potential objection. Straight off the bat, she's diffused an objection. And the objection is that, well, look, Yvette Jurgen, I love space too, but space is too far away to be worrying about. She goes, no, space isn't far away. It's 160 k's. It's nothing. It's closer to here than to Canberra. Closer from here to Canberra than from here to... closer from here to space than from here to Canberra. Okay, yeah. So just I want to make this point that she reduces the distance in two ways, doesn't she? She does it by giving us a specific number, 160 kilometers, which really is not that far. As anyone would know, 160 kilometers actually isn't that far. It's a couple hours drive. She does it in another way, through an analogy. So this effect of the first way is compounded by her analogizing the distance from space to Earth as from Victoria to Canberra, thereby placing the distance in easy to understand terms. So, look, a number's a good way of identifying a distance to an audience. An even better way, an even simpler and clearer way, is to frame the distance, in terms of a distance the audience already knows. Many people, we can imagine the general public, know how far it is from Victoria to Canberra. They know it's really not that far. And then for Jurgen to go, well, space is the same distance. Automatically, they can understand the distance from space to Victoria is not that far by default. So it's an even clearer way of putting a number on things. In some cases, perhaps you disagree in this case. Perhaps you think it's more confusing. But arguably, it's not. In any case, this also raises a potential inconsistency in Australia's approach to exploration. So, okay, now I just want to add here that I'm getting into a secondary suggestion of this opening beginning. The first suggestion was that it reduces the distance and it therefore makes the distance from space to Earth easier to understand, thereby kind of diffusing a potential objection that space is too far away to worry about. What's another suggestion of what's going on here? What's another suggestion? Well, perhaps it's this: that there is an inconsistency in Australia's approach to exploration, right? Given that we are likely to know more about Canberra than we do about space, despite space actually being closer to Victoria than Canberra. So we're kind of, is that not a little bit inconsistent in us, in the sense that, we know all this stuff about Canberra, and yet we don't know that much about space, and it's actually closer. It would be almost like as if you knew more about the suburb a few blocks down from you than you did about your own suburb, in a way. Okay, so one way to resolve this inconsistency would be for the government to invest more in space exploration. Therefore, audience members who value a consistent approach may support Jurgen's contention. So what she does here is very kind of subtle but clever. She hints at an inconsistency. That this was a secondary suggestion. She hints at an inconsistency in how we are approaching our exploration. And then she suggests implicitly that space exploration, investing more in space exploration, would resolve this inconsistency. Right? Because now we wouldn't be treating space less than we are treating Canberra, which is further away from us. All right, so this might actually, for some members of the audience who value a consistent kind of approach to exploration and knowing about the world and not just arbitrarily picking places, they might actually go, okay, well, yeah, it makes sense. We know a lot about Canberra. We ought to know a lot about space, considering the fact that space is closer to us. All right. So that's a little bit on the first few lines. Moving on. By suggesting the desire to dream about the world beyond what we know is part of our nature, Jurgen implies that exploration of outer space is an inextricable part of the human condition. It's part of our nature. So what does this suggest? Okay, so remember, language analysis is a game of suggestions. Figure out or give a good argument, figure out what the specific language suggests, and then ask, what does that suggestion suggest in turn? Get all meta about it, yeah? So this quote implies that outer space, exploration of it, is part of who we are as human beings. And that in turn implies that, well, to not venture into outer space would therefore undermine our very own nature, would it not? Because space exploration is part of who we are. So for audience members who consider going against one's own nature or their own nature to be a potentially harmful or undesirable action, they may therefore support Jürgen's call for space exploration. So it's important to segregate which members of the audience might be persuaded. Those members of the audience who don't really care about contradicting what is in their nature would not be persuaded by what Jürgen did here. But for those of us who think, well, maybe we should kind of follow what we're naturally meant to do, this might be a persuasive sort of appeal. Further, not only is exploration implicitly part of human nature, it's also the biggest thing we do. All right, so it's not just part of who we are, it's actually, the biggest part of who we are. It's the biggest, most important thing we do. This suggests exploration represents an activity at the apex of human achievement. So again, it's a game of suggestions. So the biggest thing we do, what does that suggest? Well, it suggests that exploration is very important. That if it's the biggest, it's not just very important, it's the most important. It's at the apex, the very top of human achievement. And this suggestion, it's a game of suggestions. This suggestion is strengthened by reference to Christopher Columbus, which enables Jürgen to trade off the popular conception of Columbus as the embodiment of human achievement. I think I should write trade on, actually. So the idea and I analysed Christopher Columbus more later, but just briefly, one of the reasons why she mentions Christopher Columbus here is that Christopher Columbus, as many of you may know, found the Americas, although that's debatable, and in any case, is famous as a great explorer and as one of the pioneers, or one of the most important people, one of the greatest achievers in history. So she mentions him in a way she can trade on the popular conception of Columbus. She can imbue her own argument with the appeal of Columbus. So if that doesn't make sense, just shoot me an email or we can talk about it in tutoring class. In any case, moving on, the accompanying visual also plays on this idea of space exploration as a source of immense achievement. Okay, I'm talking about not this one, but this one. This is probably the easiest image I think we have ever had. Like, it's so much easier than the ones most schools get in their SACs. In any case, let's analyze it. The lines connecting a spaceman to several extraordinary human achievements, including technology, we've got medical, we've got food, we've got transportation, e.g. ties and GPS. These lines clearly delineate the diverse benefits space exploration has created for society. I think that's pretty clear. It's not particularly hard inference to form from viewing the image. Also, all these achievements are united by a common theme. They belong to modernity. This is important, which frames space exploration as the fuel for modern progress. So this might be going a little bit deeper on the image. Okay, it's not just that space exploration is the reason for all these great inventions we have that are really fantastic, like GPS and medical imaging, but also that all these kind of inventions, they're modern inventions, aren't they? These are real, the kind of hallmarks of modernity. I mean, maybe not so much now, considering, but in 2013, if you saw this, I remember back then GPSs were the big thing, and that's actually what they look like. Now we've got them on our phone, and so forth. But in any case, these are at the time were hallmarks of modernization and progress. So this may provoke audience members who view an important role of the government to support innovation and progress, to view space exploration as worthy of more government investment. So she's basically saying that, look, space exploration gives us all these great inventions which can help progress our society. And how does this fit with her broader contention? Well, her broader contention is that the governments should invest more in space exploration. And it fits into that contention. Well, it might persuade audience members rather to believe that contention, because if they think that the government should support innovation and progress, then given that space exploration does that, then it seems like a good use of government investment. So again, I've segregated and identified which members of the audience are persuaded or might be persuaded by this language. Okay. But not just that, Jurgen is also careful to highlight the economic benefits space exploration could entail, exploiting two different persuasive tactics. So I'm talking about now this bit, where she starts talking about all the money that space exploration can give us. So, what are the two different tactics I'm going to talk about? All right, well, let's just have a look at them in my writing. The first is to stimulate the audience's imagination, right? And this is suggesting space. Yes, the first is to stimulate the audience's imagination, comma, suggesting space holds virtually unlimited resources. Okay, what does this suggest? Well, this implies that the wealth to be acquired in space is potentially uncapped. So always put the quote in your own words, right? Always put it in your own words, because it shows the examiner you actually understand what has been written. And understanding is the first step towards analyzing. You can't analyze without understanding. And arguably, you can't understand something unless you put it in your own words. So you have to put it in your own words. By not putting a number on the amount of resources in space, you're going to afford the audience the freedom to envisage, without constraint, what could be gained through space exploration. Very powerful to say virtually unlimited, rather than to go, to actually put a number on it, suggests a limit, even if that number is a big number like 100 billion. To say virtually unlimited, well, there's no end. 100 billion, 200 billion, 100 trillion, 1,000 trillion? What's after a trillion? I don't even know. The audience is therefore free to dream of explorers uncovering planets filled with gold, potentially exciting audience members by the prospect of their nations becoming lavishly wealthy. So it kind of affords the audience this freedom, doesn't it? Since the prospect of the wealth acquired is not limited, the audience is free to envisage any amount of wealth they like. So it's very powerful what she does there. But the second tactic, what does she do with the second tactic in terms of highlighting the economic benefits of space exploration? Well, the second tactic substantiates the claim that space has virtually unlimited resources by providing a real-life example of scientists discovering an asteroid containing trillions of dollars worth of wealth. It's important that she does this, I think, because a lot of people, and you might yourself be one, are naturally suspicious when someone starts making these really extravagant claims like there's trillions of dollars of wealth and yada, 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 and we're all going to get really rich. By giving an example, 1986 DA, that's the example. Now the audience members potentially are not so skeptical. Well, actually, all this wealth has been found before. Perhaps what Yvette says when she says unlimited resources available is the truth. So therefore, for audience members who are not imaginative or are skeptical of extravagant claims, this second tactic may provide sufficient evidence for them to view space exploration as a financially lucrative opportunity. They now have evidence and therefore are more comfortable with taking on Yvette's contention. Okay, next piece. By demanding Dr. Professor Lakis, who doesn't like Jurgen, by demanding Jurgen to wake up, Lakis portrays Jurgen as an idealist who has failed to consider what space exploration realistically entails. This is a very common pattern you'll see in a lot of VCAA exams. You'll see one piece advance their contention, and the second piece will respond to that contention. And a lot of the time, the first piece will be really kind of over the top, will be really extravagant, will just highlight all the advantages, and then this, which gives it room for the second piece to kind of go, well, how about the disadvantages? What's the cost? What are the practical concerns? So it's the strategy of the first piece being idealistic, and the second piece being kind of more practical or cynical. And this has actually been done a few other times in VCAA exams, and it very well could happen in your exam or your SAC, because it's a very very common pattern in comparative. And once you realize this sort of pattern, well, it makes analysis a lot easier, because you know what's going on. You know basically that everything going on here is basically just Dr. Peter Lakis going, hey, Yvette, look, you've got your pie in the sky. You're living up in the clouds. You're not actually considering the fact that, hey, it's going to cost trillions of dollars. Hey, when have governments ever just funded exploration for peaceful purposes? And how about all the problems we have in our own world? Shouldn't we be focusing on those little issues like hunger and disease and the environment? So Dr. Peter Lakis giving it to Yvette hard in the sense that, hey, you're not being practical. You're being too idealistic. So, Yvette has failed to consider what space exploration realistically entails. And this is evidenced by Lakis' sarcastic tone, thanks Yvette for drawing our attention to, suggesting that Jürgen has placed her attention in something that does not warrant serious reflection. So the suggestion when Lakis goes, thanks Yvette, in that really kind of bitchy voice, you can imagine him saying it, thanks Yvette for drawing our attention to the next big thing. The implication here is that the next big thing is not worthy really of our attention. We should be actually focusing on disease and poverty and so forth. So the implication, therefore, is that Yvette Jürgen has failed to appropriately place her attention in the right thing. And thus that space exploration does not warrant serious reflection. So this suggestion is compounded by the implication that Jürgen thinking, that's a mistake, little typo there. Jürgen thinks obviously important issues like hunger, disease, and the environment are little and thus unimportant. This suggests that Jürgen has misidentified the actual problems needing of government investment, and therefore that she's not a credible opinion of what ends governments should support. So you'll notice something here. A lot of reference to suggestion implies. This is because I'm going down the layers of suggestion. I'm going, okay, well, what does this suggest? And what does that suggestion in turn suggest? And what does that suggestion in turn suggest? And how does that connect to the audience at the end? That's what you call sophisticated analysis. Unpeeling the layers of language and seeing how an audience may react. So she has misidentified the actual problems needing of government investment. And therefore, that suggests that she's not really credible. Right? She's put her attention in the wrong thing. So why we should be listening? Why should we be listening to Yvette Jürgen? According to Dr. Lakis, we shouldn't. So Lakis' attempt to undercut Jürgen's credibility is assisted further by describing space exploration as facilitating an illusion. Implying that the benefits of space exploration are fictional and thus do not exist. Always put the quote in your own language, Because by putting it in your own language, you begin to understand it and you can begin to analyze it. So illusion, what does that imply? What it implies is something that's not real, something that's perhaps fictional, and therefore something that does not exist. Right? So the ultimate implication when you use this sort of language, illusion, is that all Yvette Jurgen was promising, all she was saying that's so great about space exploration, doesn't even exist. It's pixie dust. That's a pretty powerful way to undercut the persuasive rhetoric of an opponent. Further, Lakis uses Jurgen's own language against her, highlighting the trillions of dollars that space exploration costs. So before we saw Jurgen uses the word trillions to describe, the potential gains that could be made by doing space exploration. Lakis twists that term upon its head in terms of focusing on the costs of exploration. And what might this mean? Well, it might mean that, look, Jurgen omitted to inform the audience of the costs of space exploration, focusing only on its potential benefits. This may anger some audience members who feel cheated from the truth by Jurgen. So the point, the reason what Lakis has done is quite powerful. Is he's taken the kind of practical, cynical sort of strategy, the realist strategy, where instead of focusing on all that's great, he's focused on the kind of real life disadvantages or consequences of what would happen if they actually did do space exploration. Well, it would cost trillions of dollars. And now, given that Yvette Jurgen never mentions this, that she omits it from her argument, well, this might anger some audience members who feel cheated, that Jurgen's only really showing one side of the debate. So, therefore, Lakis' strategy of realism may motivate some members to reject Jurgen's contention. All right. Strategy of realism. Lakis' strategy of realism attacks Jurgen's suggestion. This is the last body paragraph, by the way. Attacks Jurgen's suggestion that space exploration can be used to facilitate global peace. Now, you will notice that when I was analysing Yvette Jurgen, I didn't talk about the peace argument that she gives at the end. That she says space exploration might be able to contribute to facilitating global peace. I don't talk about that. And the reason is because when you're analysing an article, you can't talk about everything. You got to pick and choose. You pick what you think you can best do. And it's only the bad students who try and analyse everything. They go wide. They go wide instead of going deep. And it's impossible to write a sophisticated essay by going wide. You have to go deep. You have to selectively pick what you are going to analyze. Because as you'll notice with some of these paragraphs that I've written, I don't quote a lot. Not a lot of, I got 2 quotes going in this whole paragraph here. The virtually unlimited resources and then the trillions of dollars, the example. That's it. And that's enough because to go deep, you're going to obviously be writing more on each quote. Okay, so Lakis' strategy of realism attacks Jurgen's suggestion that space exploration can be used to facilitate global peace. Again, Lakis uses Jurgen's own language against her, this time framing Columbus not as a noble explorer, but as a hungry capitalist powered by greed. So Yvette mentions Columbus in a positive sense, the great explorer. Dr. Lakis employs the strategy of realism, the strategy of cynicism, and says, actually, Columbus was just another money-hungry capitalist trying to extend the Spanish Empire. So, therefore, rather than someone whose actions are to be revered and emulated, Columbus is depicted in ignominious terms. So, Columbus isn't someone like Yvette suggests that we should try and copy. He's a shameful person. He's ignominious. He's wicked. He just cares about greed. That's what motivates him, and that's what motivated these governments. Empire expansion, colonialism, that sort of stuff. All right, further, the suggestion that governments only ever fund exploration for material acquisition strengthens the idea that exploration has not traditionally been about peace-giving but ruthless empire building. I just talked about that. While this point does not deny that exploration could lead to economic enhancement, it suggests that to think exploration could simultaneously inspire better international relations is to ignore historical context and therefore risk advancing an uninformed and naive argument. This is an important point. Actually, it's important to distinguish or to notice that actually, what's his name? Dr. Peter Lakes doesn't necessarily say that we're not going to make any money from space exploration. But that if we do so, let's not pretend that it's going to be out of doing this for global peace. And let's not forget that the trillions of dollars that will cost to actually do this. So it's not suggesting that they're not going to make any money, but something slightly different. Which suggests then that Jürgen is kind of advancing an uninformed argument. She thinks it's all about, hey, we're going to contribute to global peace, countries are going to come together. Like Dr. Lakes is saying, no, you've got it all wrong. We might make some money, who knows, but actually, it's not about peace, it's about empire building and so forth. So Yvette doesn't really seem to understand her own argument, is the point. Well, what's the effect? Remember, language analysis is a two-part game. Suggestion, 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 and effect. This may create skepticism from audience members towards Jürgen's implication of the peace-giving properties of space exploration. There's my alarm. Attracting them instead to Lakes's historically informed realism. So a lot of people, and I'm gonna, may now feel a little cynical towards Jürgen. They may feel a little skeptical, and that therefore might attract them to Lakes's kind of more historically based argument, more informed in a way, more historically informed. All right, therefore, conclusion, least important part of your analysis. All you got to do is just identify a few of the key ways that the author advances his or her contention. So thus, while Jürgen seeks to inspire her audience members to consider the potentially uncapped opportunity for space exploration to drive modern progress forward, Lakes derides, which means to make fun of, to ridicule, but a bit more cynically. Lakes derides Jürgen's argument as naive, suggesting she's attaching unwarranted, unjustified importance to space exploration, which is what I kind of talk about throughout here, that Lakes has misapplied her attention, that she's focusing on something that she shouldn't be, given that of all these little issues. So that's the 2014 language analysis breakdown. Remember that there are 5,000 different ways to analyze this article, and I have often analyzed the same article between periods of time and come up with completely different things. So the sky is a limit, and I will see you guys in tutoring.